So, hello everyone. My name is Edwin Urias, and welcome once again to another great panel discussion for HSI Week. With me, I have Anthony Quintana, Diana Rodriguez, and Estella Vega. Thank you all for being here today. And if you all could just introduce yourselves for the panel, even though I just introduced you by names, please.
Estella Vega, Director of the College of Graduate Studies.
Dr. Diana Rodriguez, Assistant Professor of Education, Program Coordinator, and Advisor for students wanting to become teachers.
Anthony Quintana, I'm the Coordinator of Tutoring Services and Academic Advisor at the Lobo Advising and Tutoring Center.
Great. Perfect to have you all here. Very excited to have this panel discussion with all of you. So let's go ahead and get the show on the road with the first question. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced as a LatinX student, and how did you overcome them? Who would like to start us off?
I can go ahead and get started. So for me, again, I'm a first-generation student. So for our listeners back home, if they don't know, essentially I'm the first person in my immediate family to go to college. And for that, there was a lot of different unique challenges. So one, I'm first generation, but also I'm a non-traditional. So I actually didn't go to college straight out of high school. I waited till I was about 22 years old. Had a lot of different odd jobs here and there, and then finally at that age, I figured, okay, it's time for me to pursue higher education. Not quite sure what I want to do, but just kind of did a little bit of soul searching, and throughout the application process, it was very intimidating because, again, all of these new terminologies, everything that goes into our university system, it was all new to me. So I didn't know what financial aid did. I didn't know the difference between advising and the registrar's office, for example. So a lot of these different things, I kind of had to rely on others around me, whether that was colleagues who have gone to college or were currently going through college. And also I have two older siblings, so I have two older sisters that are 7 and 8 years apart from me, so I'm the baby. And so kind of learning from their experiences as well, the do's and don'ts and things of that. So I would say those are what the biggest challenges for me is just one, figuring out what I wanted to do, because again, there's no history or track record of anyone else pursuing what I was doing. But then also two, just figuring out the whole application system. And, you know, thankfully being here at Sul Ross, everybody is super accommodating, super generous. And that made a huge difference in my overall confidence, being able to ask questions. And, you know, coming from my background, I was very shy. So it was very intimidating for me to just even answer the phone at that point when I first started.
So for me, I would say I'll echo off of what you said. When I started college, it was in 1995. And so at that time, everything was paper pushing, paper press. And so navigating myself on the college climate was difficult. And then I think the other piece that was very difficult was being college ready. I was not college ready. And since I wasn't college ready, and it wasn't because I was a bad student. I was just directed in the wrong way when I was in school. And that caused me to get behind. I literally remember taking classes, taking an Algebra 1 class as a senior, and I didn't know why. I had no idea why I was in Algebra 1 as a senior. I remember there being students that were freshmen and sophomores, and I'm like, why did they take so long to get me through, you know, an Algebra 1 is not even, you know, your top math at all. So being confused in high school as to why I had been put in certain classes definitely put me behind when I started college. And that caused me to have to pay a lot more out of pocket because I am a prodigy of developmental education. And now I'm a certified data scientist. So it's like, you know, it was just the system itself was my challenge.
That definitely does prove to be quite the amount of challenges on their own. Dealing with the system and just dealing with your own starting at 22 in and of its own, you're like, okay, like in a weird way I should be mature enough already, but you're also like, I kind of don't, you know. And then just dealing with the system on its own, that's something our students still face to this day. What about you, Estella?
I'm going to echo off both of them. I'm non-traditional. I was 21 when I attended Sul Ross for the first time. I come from where my mom's higher education was. She was 16 years old. She got a GED. My dad was illiterate. There wasn't a lot of support. I think that's the biggest challenge. Another challenge is financial, because they don't want you in debt. They don't recommend you get in debt at a very young age. And I wasn't prepared, and I wasn't college ready. And those have been the challenges. And even when I got here, I could still see that sometimes I struggled with the terminology and I struggled with comprehension, and that's because the system failed us. And I think we're in a better position now for the new generation that's coming up, because you want to prepare every student, you want to prepare your children to have a better opportunity than you did. So those challenges, like I said, echoing off both of them, those, yeah.
I do want to say something though, and I don't know if, so when I first started college, the writing lab, the writing center, because most people didn't have computers at the time, was an ACR.
Yes.
And you were working in ACR. And I remember walking into ACR and going, oh, I'm in the right place. Because before that, it just didn't feel like I was in the right space. Like, this is really weird.
Yeah.
And then I walked into that space and I was like, oh, she looks like me. I am in the right spot.
Yeah.
So, literally, I don't know if you realize, I bet you've done that to a lot of people and you didn't even realize that was happening.
It's very interesting how, as students, you feel like you're alone in this huge establishment, and it's not like, do you have a moment like that where they're like, oh, like, okay, so I'm not the only one who's a little bit lost in what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And you're absolutely right, Estella. The terminology alone scares the students. It freaks them out because it's just terminology they've never even heard of in high school. In high school, they really heard of scholarships, college, applications, stuff like that. But then once they come in here and start hearing everything that comes with the package, they're like, oh, I'm going to do something wrong. Like, and Anthony, I know you've experienced this because of where you work. Some students still rely on their parents to do things for them when they get here to college.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we want to tell us more about that.
Yeah. So just to kind of touch back a little bit on what Estella was saying and Dr. Rodriguez, I too was a byproduct of development education. And for me, coming into the university, so just for our listeners back home, I'm an alumni of Sul Ross. I recently graduated my bachelor's in May 21, and I'm working right now on finishing my master's in English. Took a little bit of time off, but jumping back to your question, so working in advising, I see former versions of myself, and I see those students, whether they're first generation or not. And with the current generation that we have with Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up, there is a lot of reliance on their parents. And it's because their parents are also, they hadn't gone to college or they have some different kind of experience. So they're learning as they go together, and they're learning about that terminology. So having gone through the university system myself, I really tried to help coach them and help mentor them as much as I could, the things that I would want, jumping back to my past and, looking at that. So the positive experience I have, I try to learn from that experience and make it my own and put my own personality in there. So yeah, there's a lot of questions about financial aid, concerns about paying for courses, understanding degree plans. So it can get very complex very quickly. So we give them a general crash course, and from there, we just give them a basic explanation. But the idea with our center particularly is to help them become more confident, more independent learners. So the way that we do that is we really try to make them feel comfortable from the very beginning, and just having those one-on-one nuanced conversations, asking them what their goals and aspirations are, how we can help them out, and how we're ultimately at the end of the day a resource center. So we don't have the answer to their question. We can at least refer them to someone like Dr. Rodriguez or Estella or anybody across campus, because we all work in unison with each other. We have to. That's the only way that our university system functions. So we have that camaraderie with each other.
That is true, and it's necessary, especially for Latinx students, because I remember when I was doing the process of becoming a Sul Ross student, my parents, yes, they'd gone to college, but they went to college in Mexico. Terminology is completely different. The way things are held are completely different. So when they came to see how things function here and they were helping me, it was like, actually, we're all learning at the same time what the terminology is, what the process is, because it's just completely different. And unfortunately, some students don't have that. Maybe they have parents who will do everything for them, or parents that just send them on their own. And again, it's a very terrifying experience. But all of us here are a prime example that these are challenges that we can overcome. And since we've overcome them ourselves, we can easily impart knowledge and wisdom on the students to provide for them as well. So with this in mind, since this brings us to the next question, how has your education impacted your family, both immediate and extended?
So I can jump in again. I'm the brave one. I'm teasing, of course. But so about my education, so regarding my education, it has helped out with my family dynamic a lot because, again, whether we like to think about it or not, our actions and the way we present ourselves, it does resonate with other people, good or bad. And for me, there's a sense of pride, a sense of breaking generational barriers with me pursuing higher education. So seeing the way that I conduct myself and going through that challenge and obstacles of higher education and dealing with imposter syndrome and other aspects that come with being a student. And I would argue that that's a universal feeling, for many students, not just first generation, but in the context of first generation, I think it's definitely augmented just because you're completely in a foreign environment like we talked about. So going through those challenges plus questioning throughout the way. Am I capable of pursuing these courses? Am I in the right place? So going through those challenges and making it through every semester and always striving for excellence no matter what, that definitely had an influence on my family, the way that they looked at me. They saw that I had potential and vision in myself, but also more broadly speaking, here at the university, I had a lot of faculty and staff members that would encourage me to pursue things. So while I was an undergraduate, I had faculty in the English department encourage me to pursue different things such as student organizations, honor societies, looking for different job opportunities. So even though I didn't necessarily feel qualified or ready to do those, they saw the potential in me even when I didn't see that in myself. So having that influence there and then having the courage to say, okay, I'm going to try it out and see how it goes. And then from there, that confidence would slowly start building within me. And then I would start pursuing things on my own. So I think a lot of people around me saw that and they just wanted to keep pushing that as much as they could and encouraging me.
We'll let you jump in.
I think with me, it's showing my kids that what's available to them, that I was able to do it as a non-traditional student, having to learn how to study, having to set the time, because of course I had a young family at that time also, and seeing them pursue their bachelor's degree. So it gave him inspiration to follow and to do that. So I think that's on the immediate family and extended. I mean, your parents, I think, are always your biggest supporters, and they're there to babysit. You have to study. You have to go to the library. We'll pick up wherever we need to. So having that support, I think, trying to pursue the education and having the support from all of them it impacted all of us because we all learned something from it.
Well, my story is very different because when I said I was going to college, it was not easily accepted. I was expected to stay home and help take care of my mother. My mother, I was 16 years old when my mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so my father was the breadwinner. There's a total of 5 of us in the household at the time. There's 4. And so my father needed someone and I'm the oldest daughter. So my father needed someone to take care of the house. And so I remember going to high school and I was a mother, I was a sister, I was a daughter, lots of intersectionality within that experience, and then a college student. And then when I was a senior, I also got pregnant. And so I started college with a 1-month-old as a single mother and all those other intersectionalities that I explained. And so for me, my father was not very supportive, but supportive, if that makes any sense. And the irony of it all is I got through it. And when I got through the doctorate, my father passed while I was in the middle of the doctorate. And at that point, I remember him saying, I wish that you all would have helped me a little bit more. So there was always that guilt. So even though, I've gone through this whole thing, there's been a lot of impact to the family in a good way. But there's also a lot of guilt. So now I'm my mom's caretaker, but now I continued my education. I didn't let it stop because I knew that I had to keep the family moving forward. Because eventually my dad wouldn't, right? And so for me, it's been a lot of personal growth. My children, my son and my daughter, they have very different perspectives. My daughter, she's also pursued a master's degree as an epidemiologist from Tufts University in Cambridge. And so, to see that, she was the firstborn, now being, the graduate. And so she graduated last May, and she's having her first baby on September 7th. And so, it's to me, it's a blessing. Education is a blessing. And even though there's that guilt that I couldn't help with my mother through that whole time, it was worth it.
Yeah.
It was worth it because there's stability. I have a stable home. I don't have to worry about, paying my bills. I don't have to worry. There's stability. And what more could you ask for?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, in my own personal experience, when I had graduated with my bachelor's, my parents made a huge revelation to me that they made a promise to my grandfather on his deathbed that they were going to take care of me and make sure that I succeeded in life. And one of the big aspects was, me graduating college. My parents never told me this because obviously that was a burden that they took on, and they didn't want to apply that burden to me because then that would have probably changed my outlook on education overall if I was like, oh, I'm taking the burden on my parents as well because of this promise they made. And they were very happy. They were very supportive the entire time. But I still remember the look of relief on both of their faces when I actually graduated and they revealed this to me. And they were like, it's a huge burden off our shoulders that we fulfilled this promise we made to your grandfather. And I was like, oh, like, it was at that moment a great point of maturing as a son, seeing sacrifices and burdens that your parents take up on their shoulders that they probably will not tell you until their deathbed, or maybe they will never tell you. Right. So I know that's probably something that both of you have experienced in your own way and have dealt with, right?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, my dad was very supportive. I don't want to come off as like my dad just all he did was give guilt, so I guess you could say that another challenge to the whole experience and being in college and getting educated, I was my own obstacle. Probably the hardest obstacle was myself.
And I think that's one of the biggest obstacles that students will have. Not only do they have any possible criticism from friends, from family, but from themselves. And you touched on this, the whole imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
We touched on this on the last panel discussion, so I want to hear your thoughts on it. What are your thoughts on our students who go through the imposter syndrome? How have you noticed it manifest with students you've interacted with?
So for me, I really try to build relationships with the students. And I try to get them to open up. And we talked about, you were my student.
Yes.
And the very first thing that I tell you when the first day of class is, I'm human first. That is my mantra. I'm human first. And I try to explain that to my students, and I try to be available to them. They know that I'm there for them, and they also know that if they need to talk about other things, I will direct them to the right sources. And speaking of Sul Ross State University, as a professor, as an advisor, I've had all kinds of students come to me with all kinds of scenarios and issues, from personal to academic to just all kinds of things going on that can happen. And being able to, I think because we're such a small institution, that helps to make that relationship so that if you do notice that there's a student experiencing that imposter syndrome, you know your student. They're not a number. And so when you can identify when something isn't right, it's just like when you're a parent, you can identify when something's not right with a child. It's the same thing when you're in the classroom. It's the same thing. You know, if you know your students and you've built that relationship, you know. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be said. So that's my experience in the classroom.
Yeah, silence definitely speaks volumes. For me, as a coordinator of tutoring services, whenever I'm training our student employees, I always tell them, you're not expected to know every answer. Sometimes the most humble thing that you can do is let the student know, I don't know the answer to this, but let's work on this together. That sense of humility is what builds connections with other students, because that's how you build trust, to say, I'm just like you, I'm just another person, and let's learn through this together. The idea of imposter syndrome, again, it's not only from the student experience for me, but also to the professional. So again, placing myself in positions where I did get an opportunity to develop and grow, I would always question them every time. Do they not know that I haven't done this yet or haven't done that yet? I haven't lied on my resume, but what are they doing hiring me? They should hire somebody else. But you kind of have to get past that in the way where you say, someone is trusting me enough and knows me well enough that they see the value of where I'm going, not necessarily how I'm starting. And that's the saying that I always like to say. It's not how you start, it's where you're going and how enjoying the process while you get there. Because it's a lifelong process. It's never ending. We're constantly learning and growing. We can have a doctorate degree, we can have all these certifications, but there's never a time where we stop learning something. It's that, and that's the beauty of life.
Exactly.
I kind of want to chime in on that. My very first semester of teaching at Sul Ross, so the same feeling that I had when I was put in front of the classroom when I was teaching in public ed, I had my first period was conference. And so I'm sitting there going like, in my first class, they're all going to be seniors coming in, and I'm just so nervous, like, oh, this is the first time, this is the first time. Well, it's the same thing when I came to teach at Sul Ross, and when I went into the classroom, there wasn't no waiting. It's like, boom, it's on, here you go. And one of the most humbling experiences was meeting a student who had come from Uganda, and he and his sister and his mother had come to seek asylum. And so he had gone to school in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and he had never seen a refrigerator. He had never slept in a mattress, and they took him to the thrift store to go get some clothes, and they got him he got a toy truck. So the lady that was part of the group that was helping the family, he just explained how all these resources that we have, like for us to be so grateful that we have them, from just a mattress to a little toy truck. But I'll never forget, he said, what the funniest English word that I remember? And I said, no. And he said, somebody. He said, when me and my sister first heard the word somebody, we just dropped to the floor and thought it was the funniest word ever. But that experience, to me, it humbled me, because here I was going, I've got, you go through your head, like, here I am in this space. They've given me the responsibility. And then I'm going, wait a minute, look at this kid. So we all come from different walks of life, but then at the same time, we all share those emotions. So.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on
My thoughts are always being available to them. When they first come in. When I first had my first job at ACR, that was one of the biggest things. We had 21 students. We had a big computer science program at the time, and just making them feel at home and knowing that we were here for them and what they had to say mattered to us. They were going to be helping us in the lab. Some of them worked a few hours, some of them could work, less hours than the others, but just making them feel welcome and knowing that if they got homesick, which we did have a lot of them get homesick, and then we had some from Pakistan that were here at the time, so they all came from different parts of the world, and we'd always sit down and talk with each other. We'd come together as a group, as a family, really, and just really find out what was going on with each one, find out what dorm they were at, what they were doing for the weekend, where they were going to spend Thanksgiving. So we made them feel welcome so that they knew they were part, and they had a place, because a lot of them don't go back. They stay during the holidays, and everybody forgets about that. So that's when they go. I'd had some attend Thanksgiving meals with us or Christmas meals with us. So, and of course, everybody does things different. They come from a different background and tradition is different. But just being more, I became more aware with what they were going through, and I became more aware and more sensitive to the cultural, because we're all different. We're different cultures. So.
It's very interesting to see the cultural background that a lot of these students come from, because here, obviously in Sul Ross, we're used to white, Mexican, African American, but then we expand on that more, and we see that people come from all walks of the world, and they offer so much more, not just to the classes, but to the services we provide them. And I'm sure that it's probably run through your heads like, I think we need to expand our services a little bit more, because we're only looking at one demographic, but it's actually a much larger demographic on a much grander scale. So I think it's very interesting to see how this goes for those students from different cultural backgrounds, which ties greatly with the next question. How important do you think it is for higher education institutions to provide culturally relevant support and resources for Latinx students, but as well as students from different cultural backgrounds?
I think it's really crucial because, again, if you're the first person in your family, your immediate circle, to venture off into higher education in any capacity, you don't know what else is out there because, again, it's based off of your environment. It's a lot of social relativism. So because of that, maybe your aspirations are limited by that. But if you see someone in a leadership role or someone who you look up to, whether it's an upper class student or professional, then you start to envision yourself in that position and say, oh, okay, that is a possibility. For me, in my own personal experience, that was my relationship with academic research and wanting to pursue graduate school. Initially, when I came into the university as an undergraduate student, it was sort of a means to an end. Receive a degree and just hopefully come out unscathed on the other end. I'm being a little hyperbolic, of course, but that's essentially, my younger mindset at the time. But being exposed to, our symposiums that we have, having these guest speakers and panelists, the things that we're doing right now with this podcast, that opened up my mind to a whole different realm, so to speak, of possibility that I never envisioned for myself. So I think the more culturally relevant things that we have, I think that's going to empower a lot of students and hopefully impact not only just our Latinx students, but just students as a whole. Because regardless of our background, our race, our creed, or anything else, they see themselves as we're students at the time, and then gauging their experience and saying, okay, this upper class student here, I can see myself getting to that point. So they see themselves in different forms, if that makes sense. So I think from both professional and student perspective, I think the more stuff we can have, the more outreach we can do, that's going to empower a lot of students, and then we'll have that wide demographic. So even though we're an HSI, it often implies that we're primarily Hispanic, and of course the numbers do show that. However, we do get a wide variety of international students. Even for me, coming in as an undergraduate student, the first thing I did after my first English course was go downstairs in More Like Academic, and at that time, that's when we had the Writing Center there. And the first student that I interacted with, he was from Liberia. And super generous man, very kind, very understanding, really empowered me and helped me understand, you're going to get through this. He had a very calm tone and demeanor, but very professional. Fast forward to when I graduated in May of 2021, we had a really cool panel presentation presented by the Department of English, and he was pursuing his PhD program, and I mentioned his name, and he immediately recognized me. So we came full circle contacting each other. I was asking for him for advice on how to pursue a doctoral program, because that was something I was looking at the time. So again, you never know what kind of impact you can have. Even if it's indirect or directly, there's long-standing implications from that. And I think if we start on the right foot, we're very welcoming, very accommodating, that can lead into something even more great. So, yeah.
I think culturally relevant pedagogy is critical. So when we're talking about culturally relevant pedagogy, it's really when the students come in, they're coming in to gain more knowledge, to become that knowledgeable other. And sometimes, most of the times, all of the time, you don't know as much about your culture as you think you do until you have professors that are very analytical and very engaged in whether it's research or literature, fiction, nonfiction, and then they bring these other, even the historical events. I didn't learn about Cesar Chavez until, I was a senior maybe in college. Yet that had been a huge situation. During that time, that's when my grandmother and grandfather met each other. They were part of that whole thing. But they are not going to talk about it with me. They're not going to, that's something that's common in the Latinx community. Your family members don't necessarily tell you everything that they've burdened through, and so having a culturally relevant pedagogy also helps create a sense of community. There's other people like me. I didn't know that this happened. I can connect to this situation. And also, when I'm talking about the pedagogy, I'm also referring to, each area, whether you're going into computer science or you're going into literature or you're going into education, there's frameworks that are culturally relevant for those specific disciplines. For example, when I started my doctoral work, a culturally relevant topic is understanding the education system in America, going way back to the very beginning. And so understanding education from how did it begin in America, what were some of the major events that impacted certain things that happen today. And so when we're talking about cultural relevance, we're also talking about not just introducing them to our culture, but introducing them and making them more marketable in the field that they're going to study. That's what I believe.
And that's a great belief, honestly. It's a great way to show why this is important. It's a great way to exercise these beliefs that we've acquired as we've grown with this. As I'm sure you've seen as well, Estella, do you have anything to add to what Diana was saying?
I'm going to add, it took me back to a class I took with Dr. Six, and I had never heard about this movie, this book, Salt of the Earth, and the struggles, of course, the discrimination, the having to work in the fields, and it really opened my eyes that I was like, I have an opportunity to get an education and look at these people, what they had to go through. It's like the Cesar Chavez, we don't hear about those things when we're in high school. You don't read those books. Yet, when my kids got to high school, Victor Villaseñor was an author. That book raised a lot of controversy. To me, it became very important for me to go to the school where to say that book needs to be allowed because it is a part of history. It is showing the times of Pancho Villa. It is showing all these things. So to me, the pedagogy, that's very important, but it makes us more aware, and it really opens up our eyes to a lot of things and opportunities for the next generations that are coming, and for us to be available to them, right, to provide these things.
And also not just to accept it at face value because it's published, because one of the huge things that a Latinx family does And this is a stereotype, but you've got to take it because it's the truth. They see it on paper and they see it printed and they think it's the truth. And so I'm like, no, that's not how it is. You've got to look at it and we've got to critically analyze it. And here's a perfect example. I was taking a Chicano literature class. And so I'm one of those that wants to analyze who's saying this, who wrote it. And so all the authors, none of them were Latinx. And so I brought the attention to the professor and I said, well, I understand that this is what the class is about, but the text that you have selected, none of the authors in this text are representative of the Latinx community. So how can this actually be Chicano literature? Like, how can we actually be studying this? And he just looked at me and he said, I'll get back to you. Well, this summer I was at Scoops and the professor recognized me and he said, Diana Rodriguez. And I looked up and I was like, oh no. And I looked up and he's like, how can I forget you? You're the one that told me. And then he said that he went back to his office after class that day and looked everybody up. And he said, sure enough, he's like, you were right. He's like, that was a good question to bring to my attention because I hadn't even thought about that. So it's also important to not just believe everything that you see written in print, which is Latinx people. They see it on TV, they see it on paper, and it's truth.
And they believe it's the 100% truth. And that is another thing that college greatly provides for our students, the ability to move past that stereotype that we've grown up with. And it's like, you need to look behind the curtain and see what's actually there. It's helpful for us to explore and really think on what we've just read and see if it's been even fully researched, if it's even written by people who are affected by said issue and not just by someone who's looking outside through the window. So it's completely true. And it's just another great example of why this relevant support and resources benefit the students regardless of their cultural background. So with this in mind, the next question, how has your college education shaped your career path and your professional opportunities?
So I can jump into that. For me, kind of going back to what Diana was saying about cultural relevant pedagogy, that's the exact reason why I was interested in literature. Initially, when I selected my major, it was just because English was an easy subject for me in grade school, but didn't have any clear direction of what I wanted to do. Once I got past my prerequisite courses in my Texas core curriculum, so Composition 1 and 2, taking a literature course for the first time, I was exposed to different ways of thinking and just understanding how literature culturally connects with everything around us. So sociologically and just everything else regarding politics, gender, race, all these different things. And I had never thought about literature in that way before. So the challenging of these preconceived ideas, whatever background we come from our public or private school education, that really opened up my mind to just different ways of critical thinking. And again, not looking at things at face value, but really dissecting, what is the author trying to say here through the lens of creative writing or nonfiction writing? What is the intended goal here? What is the statement that's being said? And then if there is backlash to it or challenge, where is that evidence coming from? So I really like that. And the more challenging these subjects got, the more interested I got in literature. So looking at it from an international and different kinds of perspectives, whatever political leaning, just looking at it from all different angles. And so for me, that really shaped my education because for the first time, I really enjoyed learning. I enjoyed being challenged in that way. So I always say I learned how to learn when I was in college, and I'm still learning, of course, especially as a graduate student, doing a lot more independent studies and work, really trying to formulate my thoughts and ideas and contributing to other academics. So for me, it's opened up my eyes to different ways of viewing the world, being more tolerant of different ideas, and also, being open-minded when it comes to challenging other people's ideas. So doing it in a humble, humiliating way. Couldn't get that word out. English major, still struggle with words. But in a humble, way. So really just, that's how it's influenced me a lot. And again, just literature as a whole, it intersects with everything. It intersects with history, politics, all of these different subtopics. And it really has shaped my worldview in different ways.
I think it opens more opportunities, for us if we have higher education. And then, because you're always competing, I didn't have a college degree. I came to work here in 98, and I'd worked in the medical records field for like 8 years. And it was different. I had to learn how to study. So I could really understand the students when they were coming in. But then I saw the opportunity. I had great people like Albert Bassam at the time. He was the director for the lab, and he said, you need to go to school. And he sat me in front of a computer. He says, okay, take the computer apart, put the computer back together, figure this out, And I was like, okay. Sends me to training, says, look, if you needed the education. And I don't really need it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try. So finally took the first course, and I said, okay, it's not easy. However, because he pushed me so hard, I did it. My dad was super thrilled. And then it made me feel better, because then I could get a job like the other guys did as technicians, and then, continue to grow. And to this day, I grow every day because I love to read and I like to see the history. And we had great professors like Dr. Baeza, Dr. Tafoya. I mean, they, to me, were big mentors for me at the time. Bless me Ultima, when he wrote that and things like that. So I could see how they were doing their job, how they were inspiring people. And I thought, I want to be a part of that. I want to make a difference, not only for myself and my family, but for other people. So it does shape us completely different, and it opens so much more opportunities for us all.
Yeah, it's definitely opened a lot of opportunities and a lot of thoughts. I agree that it's important for people to really internalize what it means to learn. As a professor, you're always learning, and you're always reading up on current and past research. And most recently, as a lifelong learner, I'm very interested in the way we critically think and the various dimensions that the brain can critically think. And so I have always been fascinated by the brain. And so when AI came about, I fell in love. And so I said, you know what? I want to know more. I want to know more about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so I said, well, I've got to brush up on my math. And so I spent all last summer doing a lot of math. And I remember calling my friend going, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm figuring out blah, blah, blah. And they're like, why are you doing that? I said, because I'm going back to school.
You're an optimist for AI. I'm more terrified.
and they said, well, why? What are you going to do? And I said, I want to get into an AI and machine learning program, but I have to get really brushed up on my math. And mind you, it wasn't math that I was taught. So I had to teach myself these high pages and pages of crazy math problems. And when I got through the first one, I thought, okay, I can do this. It's just take your time, learn the process, learn the formulas, and you can do it. So again, I spent all last summer doing math, and then I got into a program, and I got into the artificial intelligence and machine learning program at the University of Texas at Austin. And so now that leads me to my new interest, which is, and we're talking about, how has your education, how is it influencing you?
Exactly.
Well, for me, it makes me want to know more.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the next thing that I want to learn about is the relationship in the future, believe it or not, okay, it's going to scare you, but have some crazy networks with people that work for Dell and Microsoft and all kinds of people all over the world through this program. And so, what is the relationship going to look like with authentic intellect, which is human intellect, artificial intellect, and then are you ready for the third one?
Okay.
Augmented intellect, which will be the human intellect merged with the artificial intellect, creating the augmented intellect. So you can hide, but that's all you can do. So Sul Ross and everyone, I'm telling you, I'm here to tell you, it's not going away. And we all have our different opinions about it. It's like that old saying where you have those people that are blindfolded and they're all touching a certain part of the elephant, and they're like, well, no, you have that story going on about AI right now. Well, no, this is a tree trunk, and no, this is this is that, and they can't all come into agreement, while the players that are doing it are already making lots of decisions, and so we can't just stay blindfolded to it. So that's where I'm at with.
No, and I mean, that represents an important facet that comes from what you gain in college and your professional and educational paths. You start looking at the world a lot differently. You start realizing that it's never okay to just take things at face value. It's important for you to look at things and be like, where is this going to lead to? It fuels your curiosity, and you tell yourself, okay, like, I may not gain much physically, but I will gain a lot intellectually from wherever it is that I can find. And whatever it is that a student decides to look into, it's great to know that they achieved those skills because of their college education and their professional career that comes from it. And then to bounce from the whole aspect of the doors that it opens for you, it's not just what your classes teach and your professors teach you, but it's the people you meet as well. You'll be surprised how much networking you do in college passively. I remember when I got my bachelor's, I was devastated because this happened during the COVID pandemic. So we weren't forced to pass the education exam to get our certification. So I was like, okay, well, I got my bachelor's, but I didn't get my certification. I remember I was devastated because I failed that exam by 1 point. So for one semester, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I guess I can sub for a bit, but then I still need to get that certification if I want to teach in high school. And then one of my friends calls me, and he's like, hey, are you still thinking about getting your master's degree? And I was like, yeah, I was planning on doing that while subbing. And he's like, well, a position just opened up here at the library. If you take this job, if you do the interview and everything, you can take classes at the university and you can get your master's that way. And I was like, okay, that's a fantastic opportunity. Obviously, I still need to move here. And then cherry on top, he tells me, my roommate is moving out. I need someone to help me with rent. So everything just lined up so perfectly. Yes. And I was looking at it and I was like, this wasn't just a door. This is like those giant cathedral doors that just swung open. I was like, I'd be dumb to not take this opportunity. And I when I took it, I told myself, I was like, I would have never come across this opportunity if I never met this friend in college.
Exactly.
So it's very important to help our students realize these opportunities come in all shapes and sizes, and you achieve them through the people you meet.
Your network, yeah. And then and a lot of times they become leads to bigger opportunities.
Absolutely.
For example, when I was working on my dissertation at Northeastern University in Boston, I was assigned my methodologist. Terrified when I found out who she was, because she is the senior methodologist for the U.S. Department of Education.
Wow.
Well, thanks. So I was like, this is bittersweet.
Yeah.
So it kind of just goes with what you're saying. Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. And I mean, another big example that happened to me just by working at the library and getting to meet more and more people now through a staff position. I got to meet Kathy Stein. Kathy Stein told me, hey, Anthony told me that you're also an English major working on your master's. would you be able to help us teach a class over the fall? I was like, yeah, sure. So I helped her once, I helped her twice, and then she told me, how would you like a full-time position as a lecturer? Yeah. And I was sitting there and I was like, wait, what? Like I got caught so, yeah, I got caught so off guard because I ended up at my goal without realizing I ended up there. And I looked back and I was like, what path did I take? It was so weird, but I ended up there.
Yeah.
And it's just the whole, wow, like one opportunity leads to another, and it just depends on
who your circle
is. And you don't even realize that those people were in your circle until it happens. And you think to yourself, oh, wow, I've gotten a lot through this. Mm-hmm. So it's great that we serve as examples for our students, that you can get opportunities just by attending college, just by passively doing something that's been imprinted on us for a very long time. And before you know it, you're going to start hearing calls from friends, from people you ran into once in a while, or like even just a friend that you make who decides to make a business venture, and he's like, hey, you know what? You and I were such good friends. Why don't you jump in the business venture with me? And before you know it, you blink, and for some reason, you're one of the best businessmen in the world.
Yeah.
And maybe not even something as big as that. You become a professor, you become a news anchor, so on and so forth, and you realize, I didn't do this alone. It's very rare the cases where someone does that alone nowadays. I did this because people in their own way chipped in, and before I knew it, I was there.
Yeah, and as advice for, current students and students that are looking into becoming a part of the Lobo family, it's so important, and this was said in the previous podcast, for them to be comfortable in making mistakes, but it's also very important to keep themselves at a high standard, because we're such a small institution that everybody knows everybody, and you're basically being, I hate to say it, but you're already being watched.
Yes.
Like, are you going in the right direction? Are you going to be a good fit? Would you be a good fit? It's already happening once you set foot in your classrooms, because the professors talk with staff, and we're just a small circle. So that's a lot of it. That's important advice.
Yes. It's very important for the students to realize who they are going to be once they come out of college. And I'm sure you've all seen it. There is a huge difference to the group of friends you had in high school compared to the group of friends you have now in college. And then you compare those to the friends you make with your peers. I mean, Anthony and I discussed this while we were working on our masters together. When you're doing your master's, professors set you at a whole different standard, because they no longer see you as students. They see you as potential peers. They see you as someone, is this someone who I will one day think I want to do a research project with them? And that is the new standard that's been set for you. And that is something that, again, Anthony and I have realized about our professors, as well as you've realized this as well, Diana. We don't gain anything from lying to our students.
Right.
If we as educators, when we offer services, we're going to tell you the truth, because you need to know that is the truth of what you are doing, because you are not going to improve on it. And it's like you said, those standards are there for a reason.
On the grad side, I'm just going to say that what we try to do in graduate admissions is just ask. What is it that you really want to do? Like you said, where do you see yourself in a couple of years if you do get a master's in this? And we always say, if it's not the right fit, it's okay to come back and say, it's not going to work for me. Can I apply for something else? What is going to fit you? And then really important is, I always ask, do you have a family? Are you taking care of parents? Because we do have some that start the program and aren't able to finish. And a lot of times it's not because they don't want to, it's because they have obligations. They take care of elders, their parents, they'll be taking care of their kids, they're working a full-time job, they're juggling too many things. So I always say, try to start slow. Take a class, know that we're here, know that we have not only the Writing Center, but you have tutor.com that's available to you. It's free. It's 24/7. There's so many things available to you. Don't feel that you can't reach out because you're a grad student. You need to reach out just like if you were an undergrad. Yes, you're held at a higher standard. Yes, there's more expectation, but we also know you're human. We also know that life gets in the way. I was that student. Life got in the way. So it took me a little bit longer to get my master's, but I got it. So I achieved it. But that, we just really try to make them feel more at home. We're here for you.
And I think the biggest thing too is when you start and comes from my personal experience as a grad student when I was working on my master's, when you start feeling yourself getting a little bit overwhelmed or like there's too much that you're delegating your time and what you need to do as best as you can, there's just a lot on the plate. It's okay to, number one, communicate with your professor. You have to communicate with your professor because your professors do not know what's going on. Right. So that's your first point of contact. Obviously, if you're taking a class with someone and you're getting behind on an assignment, go straight to the professor. Don't be afraid to just let them know what's going on. And then also, if you need help with time management, I know that we've got staff that, that's what they do. They help with time management. They help with, there's all these skills that you develop that you have to develop as a student. And time management is critical.
Yes.
And also self-discipline, and also knowing the difference between procrastination and self-care.
Yeah.
It's very true.
I would echo off of those two sentiments there, because even from the undergraduate perspective, working and advising with our students, I always try to tell them, because they come in with, a predisposition of what they want their major to be, what their end goals are. For a lot of our student athlete population, they're here to play ball, they're here to play sports, and they see that. And I say, great, I want to encourage you, aim big. That's awesome. But I want you to envision yourself as something more than that, more than just an athlete. That's awesome. You're going to leave a legacy on the field or in the court. That's great. I'll be your biggest cheerleader. Everybody here in the office will be your biggest cheerleader. But also, what's the value proposition in college for you? What does it look beyond that? Let's say, for example, you don't make it to the professional league. Do you still want to be involved in the sport? Are there other aspects that you strive towards? Are you first generation, So just having that conversation with them naturally and allowing them to feel comfortable sharing that information. I really try to help them understand, what college can do for them and also how they can contribute, because I think it works both ways. So for them as a student athlete, again, as Diana mentioned, they're being looked at. Every student is being looked at, every staff member, faculty, so the way we carry ourselves. So what does that look like off the court and on the field? What are the things that are they doing? Are they involved in the community? Are they involved in student organizations? Maybe they never consider those things. So we try to encourage that in a positive way and just really say, look at these different aspects. How can these courses benefit you? And I'll say, anecdotally, I've had students that have challenged me on different courses that we have to have them go through, just because it's part of their degree plans. But when they come out, they say, what, I'm so glad I took that class because, it challenged me, but it was what I needed. I'm more optimistic about pursuing this particular area of study. Or we have this revelation where they say, what, I thought this program was for me, but I really found out that it's not, and I want to explore other options. And just letting you know that's okay. It's okay to change your mind. That's the beauty of college, is being challenged with different ideas and also the exposure to different opportunities like we've talked about. So I think that's the opportunity we have at the undergraduate level to really catch that early on and allow them to say it's okay to make mistakes. These aren't really mistakes. These are life experiences. And changing that wording a little bit so they understand, it's okay to go through things. I always tell students the best way to know what you want to do is to figure out what you don't want to do. The way you do that is just go through everything. And just have a checklist. Okay, I don't want to be a psychologist. Maybe I want to do art. I didn't like art. Okay, maybe I want to do nursing. So we try to help them, organize their thoughts and goals and aspirations and translate that into a degree program for them. So that's really what we try to do, is offer that personal touch.
And I think that's a great bounce to the next question. With this in mind, looking back, what do you think were the key factors that contributed to your success in higher education?
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it ties in with what we've all been saying, who we know, and not being afraid to reach out, because talking to faculty, talking to staff and other peers, just seeing all their different collective experiences, it's the people around me that have influenced who I am. You know, I can get credit for accolades and different certifications and all these things, but none of that matters without the people who helped me out. So it's the people who help shape me that allows me to be where I am today. So I always give thanks to other people, because it's other people's influence and life experiences that get passed down to me. And for me, I can discern those things and take certain things and remove other things and allow that to shape my own individuality and my own personal identity, and in turn pay it forward with other students.
So for me, it's was the responsibility of being in charge of another human being. That was like, whoa, you get it together. You've got, I mean, not that I didn't have it together, but now it was like zoomed, like now you're responsible. And then once I got into the climate, the higher ed climate, my professors, and then, you know, because I wasn't college ready, which, you know, I don't know all the experiences of our students, but it's okay. It's okay not to be college ready, but it's not okay to stay there. You've got to study.
Agreed.
You have to study. Even when the assignment is just, you feel that it's a waste of your time, you've got to critically work through your work. And, you know, I'm bringing artificial intelligence back into the conversation. Now it's really easy to just get, you know, generative AI to generate your work, and then you can turn around and tweak it and make it yourself. Just know that is not augmented intelligence. No. You have to build your own stamina. You have to build your schema. You have to build your own intellectual thought. You have to, just like you have to create an identity of how you want to be, you have to create an identity of who you are as a learner. Yeah. How do you learn? You're not going to learn who you are or how you learn if you're just using artificial intelligence. Artificial means fake. You can fake your way through and then get nowhere. But you also have to remember, we've talked about networking. So what you are on paper and what you are with people are two different things.
Huge difference.
So my biggest advice is learn to learn and learn to work with people. You need both.
Yes.
And don't just use generative AI to do your work.
Exactly.
Please don't.
Really have to embrace AI. But it's a good thing. I mean, it's like technology when the computer first came out, when you had the internet. I think AI is a little bit different. I think it's going to be better for us in some senses. But I'm hoping that it's not like social media, you know, because we do see that people believe everything they see on social media instead of really investigating and finding out where the truth is, like the books, like you said about the authors.
Whole nother segment.
It's a whole nother segment, but
because I see them as tools. You know, you can use them or you can abuse them. You know,
yes,
yeah.
It's very easy to go on the extreme end and abuse it, because that's how a lot of these platforms are designed.
They are.
So subconsciously, you know, it's having an impact on us.
But this is so different because, you know, people are like, oh, well, you know, the calculator, and you know, people thought that, you know, pocket calculators were going to, of course, we have a different perception of what math was in the 70s and what we think math is now. But my argument to that is calculators give correct answers. Generative AI has hallucinations. And so they need to be able to critically analyze, is this giving me the truth? Don't just take it at face value. This goes back to what we said. Otherwise, you might as well go do your research with the Inquirer. It's not a good tool if you don't know how to use it appropriately. And I think that is something that we will be working towards as an institution, is training our students how to utilize it as a tool and not as
a crutch.
As a crutch to do your work.
Yeah.
That's going to be really important.
I think it was, I don't remember if it was Dr. Petty or if it was Dr. Rosemary Bersanian who pointed out that in a paper that they were working on, and they realized it was AI generated because they tried to pass it off as their own, and they had asked the generator to basically write a whole thesis paper for them, and they even told it to put in citations. The citations the AI would put in would lead to nowhere.
They were made up.
They were made up.
Yeah.
And a lot of students do not realize that.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is how you know this is not meant to be a crutch.
Yeah.
This is meant to be a tool for you to put in your own words and then ask the AI, hey, what can I change? What is wrong with my paper? Don't write it for me. Point out what's wrong to me. So there's a right way to use AI, but there's also a completely wrong way to use it. And of course, a lot of students prefer the wrong way to use it just because it's a little bit easier, but it's going to hurt them in the long run. Because like you said, they could coast on AI their whole college education, but when it's time to swim on the deep end and they realize that the floaties got taken off and they're like, oh, I have never actually practiced swimming, they're going to sink.
Because
When they go to, when you do your comps, you're not going to have.
That's right.
You do your comps, that's right.
Yeah, it's not about the grade or the paper itself. It's the skills you learn while you're
Exactly.
developing ideas on the paper. And that's what they don't understand.
And we do come from our students in Texas and pretty much across the country are coming from districts with where they have to take these standardized exams, and these standardized exams determine whether they know the knowledge or not. Well, we know that in higher ed, it doesn't work like that. Right. So each time you're doing your work through that generative AI, you might as well just be cheating. Yeah. And I mean, you're just wasting time. You're wasting an opportunity to learn. And I think it's also going to be really critical for professors to start having conversations and saying, okay, well, what was the situation? Why did you decide to do your work this way? And we need to start listening. Is it because they're saying that they're tired? Is it because they're saying that they don't know how to do it? Is it because they're saying it for whatever reason? And then that we need to be paying attention to that, because then that makes us be more aware of where we need to provide support.
Exactly.
I agree, especially on the tutoring side, really analyzing what are the pain points that they're experiencing throughout that critical thinking process. Are they unfamiliar with how to cite in a certain style guide? Are they unfamiliar with discerning between the personal argument versus paraphrasing? What are the gaps, and how can we help out with that so that they feel comfortable enough to go through that struggle of developing their ideas, but they at least have a foundation of how to go about doing that. So there's all these different questions that I'm looking at right now and thinking about, how can I train my student employees as well, so that they're aware and they can communicate that to the students.
And evidence-based thinking, writing, and talking, you can only learn through critically thinking.
Right.
And so, we don't sit at, when we do evidence-based talking at the Huela's house, it's, well, I remember this because I saw you, or because you did it, or because your Theo said. Well, that's not going to work here, So evidence-based thinking, you acquire it by critically thinking.
And what is the evidence of this, of the whole standardized test is affecting a lot of students? A great example of this is there are people who are great at taking tests. They are great at them, but there's people who are not. Taking a standardized test does not reflect who they are as a student. And a great example of this is there are certain teachers around the nation and around the world who are great test takers, but because they coasted throughout college, you quickly realize that they're not actually great teachers. They just so happen that they wanted that job because they're like, oh, it comes with a lot of great perks and everything. Meanwhile, you have those who would have been fantastic teachers, but because they are not great test takers, they were prevented from doing that opportunity. Because I know, for example, in Texas, there's only a certain amount of times you can take the test. And they're like, oh, well, I guess that was never really meant for me. But you're like, no, it's probably meant for you. It's just unfortunate that the process at the moment is something that you're not strong at. And with the whole letter grade thing, a big example was also COVID. A lot of high school students got passed because COVID was such a new thing to everyone. It was a very weird situation, and students were like, well, I guess we're going to pass the students with 70s. So a lot of students came out with the mentality of, I'll get passed with a 70. It's fine. I don't really have to try. But then they get to college, and it's like, no, you still have to try. We're not just going to give you a free grade, because we don't gain anything from out of it, and most certainly you gain nothing from it. Instead we fail you as educators if we lie to you and tell you, oh yeah, that 2-page paper is fine, don't worry about it, it's an A. And in all reality, you look closely and it's like, no, that's an F. Like, this student really needs to work on that paper. So the whole coasting, the whole just relying on the letter grades, using AI as a crutch, is something that we are all adapting to, and it's very important, once again, to see it as a tool and not a crutch. So with that in mind, we've already given bits of advices here and there, but to close it off officially, what final piece of advice would you give to Latinx students who are just beginning their college journey?
I would say, don't be afraid, take that bold leap, no matter how scary it seems. Go for it and aim big. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and know that you do have a purpose in place here at Sul Ross or at any institution. And the way that you discover what that place is and where you fit is just by being exposed to different things. Because once you're exposed to the ideas, that's where that seed gets implanted, and from there, that's where that confidence grows. And you never know where it'll take you.
Just be themselves.
Yeah.
Be yourself when you get here, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask questions. See where you want to be.
I would say monitor your circle. A lot of times my grandmother used to say, tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are. If you want to be successful, you have to be around people that are successful.
Yes.
If you want to be lazy, it's easy to be around lazy people. And also, if you find yourself going in a different track, because when you get to college, you create your first group of friends, and then you find yourself disconnecting. That's okay.
Yeah.
You've got to find your right circle, because if you're just staying connected because of the fact that was the first person you met, yet they're bringing nothing to complement and move you forward, it's okay to disengage.
Yes.
And also, as a professor of education, be conscientious of what you post on social media, because that's going to follow you. Yes, you're going to be in college. Yes, you're not going to have all of the boundaries that you had at home, but you have to produce your own self-discipline and create your own boundaries. I'm not saying don't have fun. I want you to have a lot of fun. You're going to have a really good time. But again, learn how to manage the difference between your having fun, your self-care, and your procrastination. College is not easy. If you're coming in and you're not college ready, you're going to have to work harder. And sometimes that's going to mean that you can't go to the football game, or you can't go to wherever it is that you were going to go. And lastly, in the Hispanic culture, we miss class because our second cousin's cousin passed away or is in the hospital. You can use those excuses all day long. There is a standard on absences.
Yes. Yes, there is.
So, I mean, just be smart, ask questions, and if you don't know, find someone who does.
Exactly.
And we're here to support you.
Absolutely.
We're here to support you.
That is very, very true, and I think that is a great piece of advice to end on, unless any of you would like to add anything else before we close off. No, well, thank you all very much for being here. It was great to have you, great to learn from a lot of you and everything you have talked about today.
Thank you for having us. This is great.
Fun.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.